Thank you, Chris. Sincerely appreciate that presentation, and got me fired up now too. So I hope that's the case for all of us here. We'll open it up for questions, and if you have a question, raise your hand, brother in the church, and Ramsey will bring you the microphone.
That was excellent, brother. I don't think there's too much that we can talk about evangelism.
Right.
I think we can talk about it as much as we possibly can. Not as much a question, more of a comment. You know, I was thinking about what you were talking about, asking simple questions. And I think so much of it really is building relationships with people and being willing to talk to people. You know, when Philip goes and he preaches to the Ethiopian eunuch, he starts his conversation, do you understand what you're reading? When you're at a coffee shop, somebody's reading their Bible, do you understand what you're reading? What does Jesus tell the woman at the well? Give me a drink. Starting simple conversations with people with simple questions can go so far. That's really all I wanted to say, but I just think it's so important that we understand that be willing to talk to people and be willing to ask them questions and let them lead the conversation. Let them tell their story and let them talk before you just jump in, because I think we want to Bible slam people sometime. Let them talk. Let them tell you their story and then preach the gospel to them. That was my comment.
I didn't include it in what I had tonight for sake of time, but what Bart had said at the beginning and the end of his lesson last night, give people permission to believe something. Give them permission to agree. Find common things people have all kinds of crazy ideas about what the Bible has to say, but find the places where we can agree on things and go from there. Don't agree with false doctrine or false teaching. Find what you can agree on and use that as a springboard. And then the other aspect of what you were saying is, if we're setting the example, I didn't tell this story either. When I was a young man, I sang all the time. When I'm an old man, I sing all the time. I love good gospel music, and I love to sing. And I was singing on top of a roof one day, and somebody walked by and said, man, I know that you have a relationship with God because of the way that you're singing. Whatever we're doing, do it unto the Lord. Give our full heart to it, whether it's praying before we eat at a McDonald's. Oh, don't go to McDonald's, but wherever you go. Praying before you eat, whether it's singing out in public or just living righteously, that can set the best example and bring those questions, and then don't Bible beat them. Find common ground, and then sit down in an organized way, study with them. Yeah, thanks. Good question. Or good comment.
So this one, I've had issues teaching some of our younger brethren about this one. This one stumped me a few times. What would you suggest for people who ask, basically if we ask them, hey, why don't you come to our service? They say, well, if I go to yours, then you have to come to mine as well to make it fair. Or those are like, well, come to mine first and then I'll go to yours. What would you say to that?
That's a tougher one. And I'm not 100% confident I know the right answer to that. I know some wrong answers to that. You cannot forsake our assembly to go to somebody else's. That's not only irresponsible, it's unrighteous. We have to be here when the church is called. But the idea of a little give and take with somebody, I'd like to ask somebody a little more mature than I am with some of the understanding of that. If you're not worshiping in error with someone, I don't see the harm in it, but you also want to not give the image that you are. So I would put a lot of thought, time, and energy in it before you go. I know when I was younger, I would go different places. I was not looking for some false teaching or some new truth. I was confident in the truth, but I'd never been exposed to anything else other than what's on TV. And I dropped into a couple different places. It had an impact. It built up my faith to know how off some places are. But I think we have to be very careful entering into the lion's den, so to speak.
Yeah, it was very good, brother. Thank you. To that last question, Levi, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on Levi's going to a Bible study at a multiple cups congregation in Hawaii, and with the specific purpose of trying to, get a relationship and then maybe have an effect. So, like your thoughts on that. And then my question is, as a young man, I just kind of drew a line in the sand about hanging out with non-believers. Tried to make friends of members of the church and do things with the members of the church. And frankly, I've just fallen into that as a lifelong habit. I'm not a person who invites work people over. It just became, hospitality with church members is what we're commanded to do. And that's difficult. There's enough church members that takes all your time. And so, I don't know. It's difficult to phrase a question. I wish I had been more of a pursuer of inviting people into our home over the years who weren't church members. But I just kind of developed a reflexive, I knew there was alcohol involved and, all the things that people do. And so I do regret that, and just thought, your thoughts on that?
So that's another area that we have to tread very carefully. We have an influence over those that are around us, but they have an influence on us as well. I mean, we have to be very careful in those moments, but we also have to seize moments and seize opportunities when they arise, and to create those moments and opportunities. And sometimes that will mean opening the doors to our home to people that, their communication, their conduct is completely foreign to us, but we always have to protect our righteousness and our ourselves in it. And so that's where strength in numbers, that grassroots things that we can rely on each other for, that's the moments where bring a few in together and work together on that. Then you're less likely to let something like that affect you the way it would if you were going solo in it. Yeah.
Brother, I really appreciate that very much. Everything you said is very timely and convicting. You cited a statistic along the way there. I think it was something like people who visit a church, come to church, I think you said 1%.
1 to 2% of those people are from like an advertisement. And there's a whole list of those. I have it written down. I didn't bring it. The 85% was the one that is from invite by a member.
So like a coworker or schoolmate or something. Right. Well, that's really an impressive statistic. My question is, where is that source? Do you have that information?
I have it written down from when I heard it here, and then I went back online and looked on the internet. So I can get the study later tonight from you. Yeah.
Okay.
Statistics. I meant to say that when I said statistics. 90% of all statistics are made up on the spot. So
that's a good point.
And I had some confidence in the validity of that. I did 2/3 of Paul Harvey's 3 sources on that one, for all those that are old enough to know Paul Harvey's 3 sources. So I had 2/3 of the source. I found it online, and I had a faithful brother I had written it down when they had said it. But that's right.
Well, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot.
That's fine.
I think you're being honest with it. I'm just curious. I would like to reference that.
There were multiple studies that I had seen when I was doing the research for that. Yeah. Unfortunately, I didn't write them down to bring. But there's a lot there, just in the searches that I was working on.
I'm sure just a search will pull that up. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I really liked your spiritual generation versus physical generation. Right. That was interesting. I like that a lot. Something for us to think about. And I think a whole lot of it just practice. You just got to get out there and put yourself out there. Take a risk.
I have a question, which is, I don't know that I'm not unique in this, but I can be a chronic overthinker.
Sure.
And sometimes we see those opportunities, and then we think, we start thinking. No, it's not a right time. Yeah, they're really busy. I'm really busy. Do I have time for this? This is going to feel awkward. I think that's maybe one of the biggest ones.
Right.
This is going to be weird. They're going to feel weird about that. When you start overthinking, what are some suggestions that you have?
So I live under the idea of what's the worst that can happen. And to the point that I made at the end, the worst that can happen is the eternal fire. So is the eternal fire that somebody that you've met or somebody that you love, is it worth your anxiety? Is it worth your trepidation? Is it worth your hesitation to ask that simple question? I just don't know how accountable we're going to be on the day of judgment for the moments that we didn't take advantage of because of simple, some mostly selfish excuses, I think that's what you're getting at. So pushing past that, that takes effort. It's hard to do. I find myself sometimes being in that same moment where, they're going to think but who cares? Who cares? Are you ever going to see that person again? Or is it somebody that you love so dearly that you want them alongside of you? Either way, both are important and neither matter today. They matter eternally. So perspective on that. I think just keeping that focus. I think when we keep the idea of eternity always at the forefront of our mind, always renewing those thoughts with where we're at in our lives, where we need to be, and where we want to help others get there because of that eternal goal and that eternal consequence if we don't, is very important.
Really appreciated the lesson, especially as someone who was converted through personal evangelism. So I really like your emphasis on personal evangelism and not just abdicating responsibility to the congregation. So I have two questions. Okay. My first is, how many people in that tree you put of the 8 generations were converted from a gospel meeting versus converted from personal evangelism, a friend that they were close to and having studies and talking with them?
There were 0 people of the 180 that have came through that I could have any memory or any other conversation that came from a gospel meeting.
Okay.
And some of them, that may have been their first invite, but every single one of them were there because one of the members invited them to be there. Or they moved to the area, or the 3 that we had that dropped in.
Okay. So my second question is then, the Church of Christ puts a lot of emphasis on gospel meetings being our source of evangelism. And I think we put too much emphasis on that. And we use it to get away from our responsibilities to personally evangelize. So my real question is, do you think because of how much better personal evangelism works than gospel meetings, that instead of gospel meetings, congregations should focus on maybe meetings or workshops focused on equipping members of the congregation to be better personal evangelists?
I think we should be spending a lot of time equipping each other to improve, to be able to do personal evangelism. I think it's something that we should be having regular conversations, if we're spending time, energy, even money in a local congregation, whatever the local autonomous congregation decides to do with that, they need to be helping people become better personal workers. There's a lot of resources out there for this. There's books, there's old books, there's newer books. A lot of our brethren have put out things to help with this, and there's more that we can do through our individual study to help this. But to kind of go off of the gospel meeting concept, things change with time. The day of the tent revival, or even the format of it, had its time, had its moment, and we still carry on traditions of that, but it's kind of it's transformed for the church today on how that's effective for the church. And I do believe there's a place for it and its importance, but more for the edification of the saints than for the converting of the lost. We're not seeing, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure if people listen, they may take issue with this, and I didn't say it in here because I didn't want to be controversial, but if you look at your gospel meetings as a way to build up the saints, and working with them to equip them to evangelize, it will have the same effect that it did when it had its moment where people would travel to hear the traveling preacher and the tent revival and that type of format. So we change our purpose with it, but we don't have to take it out of what we're doing. But if we're asking, and I think there's a hint of this in your question, if we're asking one individual who's been ordained in a position to do the work for us, we've missed the mark completely. A congregation, when they ask to have somebody who's doing the work of an evangelist like Timothy should have the work going on and a purpose for it, and for that person to help harness that, and for them to work alongside of instead of for the congregation. And if we're not doing that, we need to reevaluate and take a closer look at how we're applying it.
Thank you. Really appreciated that answer.
That was the question I was most scared of, just so you know.
So to follow up on that question,
Yes.
your last sentence there, or phrase, paragraph, whatever, about evangelists, it hits home for me in particular because I think back on all the people I've traveled with, all the things that I've studied, and a lot of it is geared not towards necessarily equipping the saints to go spread the word, but to equip the saints to know what the Bible is. It's more about Bible teaching rather than lived experience, and spreading the word in that fashion. So I also have a smaller second question, but do you think that this should be something that we emphasize with young men who say they want to preach? How should your topic tonight on grassroots evangelism impact how we train evangelists?
Okay. So, give me a second just to make sure I say how I want to say this. We oftentimes put people in positions that they're not qualified for, and it's unfortunate, and it can do damage. We have to be careful. We find young men who from an early age decide they want to speak the gospel. They want to preach the gospel. They decide they're going to be evangelists. We send them with another evangelist to tag along, to hold meetings, to learn how to hold meetings. But we don't ever really teach. And some are. I don't want to say this as a blanket thing. We sometimes lose the purpose and the work that's involved in it, where we should be congregationally building people up. All of us in a congregation should be building each other up so that there will be evangelists that rise out of that, instead of pushing a person into a position that they're not ready for. I'm trying to tread really careful with that one. I look at myself, and I had many failures in my life. And one of my biggest failures was jumping into the work of evangelism at an age and a mindset where I was too prideful and thought I was ready, and I wasn't. I was in my early 20s, and I failed miserably, and I failed so many people miserably to the point where now that I'm 50 years, asked to speak at something like this, it's come really full circle. I'm like, I'm just now ready, and I still have things I need to improve on. But at 22, I was so clueless. And that was me, and that's not everybody, so I'm not blanketing that.
It was me. It still is most of the time, but thank you for that. Any other?
You had a second question? You're good?
Okay. Yeah, I'll ask it. You also had a phrase where you were saying how important it is that it's not just an individual effort, but it is a congregational effort.
Yes.
And there's a lot of power in that sentiment that, we're not just keeping score ourselves. I had X many people that I brought to church.
Right.
But there's a power in the congregation. So can you talk about what a congregation should think when we have visitors that come in, or just in that it's not a lone effort? Can you speak to that?
Sure. So I'm going to go back to Marion. One of the things that we do really well at Marion is we welcome people. I mean, the love that we have for people, just people, is extraordinary. And that's the way all Christians should be. I don't want to step on, there's a love lesson coming up next. I don't want to step on that, but the love that we should have for people should be evident. It shouldn't be, you're sitting in my pew. We joke about that, but we've seen it, haven't we? We've seen the attitudes and the frustrations and the bickering and the fighting and how damaging it can be. But when we have people come in because our 22-year-old member is inviting his friends from this club that he's in, we should be so thrilled. We also need to be patient. We bring people in from the world, and they are immersed in the world. And this world is wicked. And so we have to be patient. In those 180 people, there's some that weren't on there that I'm going to add to because as I continue to remember people, there's some who came in and because of our haste, we give them zero time to mature and pushed them away. And that's a tragedy. Not that we tolerate sin, but we also have long suffering and forbearance and patience with the fact that we're converting from the world. These aren't our children that we raised in the Lord that are getting baptized. These are people who came from the depths of sin and need to know the truth and need to have us be patient enough with them to bring them to that good, full understanding of the truth.
Last question.
Yeah, well, it's more of a comment, and I want to say agree with and that last thing you just said was amazing, and you stepped all over my toes.
Sorry.
And, I need to be better in every respect in this. But I just want to emphasize the doctrine as well. Mm-hmm. I felt a little bit of a anti-gospel sermon or gospel meeting vibe there, and people are going to be listening to this, and what we have to offer is the doctrine.
Right.
That's what we have to offer. The denominations are all about, let's go out and tell the gospel. It's a wrong gospel, but they do that. And when Timothy was out evangelizing, Paul said, "Till I come, give attention to reading, to exhortation, to doctrine. Take heed to yourself and the doctrine. Continue in them, for in doing this you will save both yourself and those who hear you." So
right.
I think there's nothing wrong with the way we do it. And I agree with your pastor comments too. It's not the pastor's job, or the preacher rather. It's everybody's job. But man, we can't get away from having meetings and teaching the doctrine and saying, this is the Church of Christ.
Right.
It's not the rest of this denominational world. This is us. But again, 100% agree.
I tried to emphasize that, and for sake of time, I knew I had to be careful with some of the question and answering comments because I didn't want it to be misconstrued at all. We never, ever take away from what the Word says and what we're doing, ever. And we can't tolerate leaven. And we have commandments to be forbearing, to be patient, and for people to grow in the faith, but we can't compromise to do so. Like when I said when we're studying with people, you find your common ground and you springboard from there, but you don't ever agree with something that's not right. And then we don't want to take away from sound doctrinal teaching. I don't care who is visiting in the audience. Anything that the Word of God says should be able to be said. You may have to season it with salt and know your audience, whether you're in Rome or not. I'm just taking all these passages way out of context, sorry. But you need to season your words with salt at moments, and it might not be the moment for you to hit the meat so hard that they have no understanding, and cater your lessons as teachers and preachers should in those moments, but you don't shun to tell it. You still tell it. The thing with Tyson, and I'm going to share this with you. When Tyson was converted, and he's still just absolutely on fire, my dad was giving a lesson and passively spoke about a woman cutting their hair or a man having long hair. And that wasn't part of his lesson at all. It was a brief thing that he just a whisper almost in his lesson. Tyson's heard that, dove deep in it, and cut his hair to respond. And most of the time we're afraid of those things. Most of the time we're afraid to tell the truth, and we should never be. Never hold it back when it needs to be said. Yeah.
you have any final closing thoughts?
I think I've said enough.